back to the Berg podcast. Thanks for joining me today. With me today is Ford.
Hey, how's it going?
And Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And today we're talking a little bit about, what did you say, Ford? How the sausage gets made?
Yeah, exactly.
about projection a little bit, and sort of like what it kind of takes to work as we come to the end of our fiscal year, 9/30 fiscal year end. What it takes to kind of close things up and really try and set ourselves up for some success in the next coming year.
Yeah. So it's, and I go back when I thought about it, I go back to where we started, right? When we started, we were the size we were because that's the size we were. Like, you know what I mean? I was here,
Sure.
And Ford bid some work and tried to show me how to bid work, and we would win work and we performed that work. And then at the end of the year, when the work was done, that's how much we were.
Right.
And then I can't even speak to at that point what projections were because I wouldn't have known. Like Ford might have known to take it to a bank or something, but I had no idea what we were trying to do next year.
It's funny because it's like organic growth in the most natural sense of the world. Like, we grew based on whatever it was that came through the door and made sense.
Right. Whatever made sense, whatever opportunities.
People saw you were out there, they called you, and all of a sudden you got more work, and then you had to find more people, and then you found more work, and then you get to a certain volume, and that no longer plays.
Yeah, it just, at least not in the same way. I mean, if you want to continue to grow organically in that same nature, you just have to cover so much ground and be in so many places for there to be enough word of mouths and things
well, and
like
also,
that. So,
Brian a lot of times has used the word that violent, right? That the growth became violent at times where we were just, and then I feel like I say it proudly, we were so effective at doing the work and
opportunistic
at going after it and then effectively performing it and not aggravating people that it just kept coming. And so we just kept growing. And we got to this point where at some point I said something about we'll stop growing when we get to the size that we can't be what it is that we are. Right. Sure. And I know that's what I said. And it was off the cuff. I said it and we got there. And we got there in a really violent, chaotic way where we had a lot of people and we were just grabbing people who were effective and could work, but weren't necessarily culture fits. And we were taking the work that came to us based on what came to us. And it was in places we wanted, but with no focus on doing what we want, where we want, with who we want, just on opportunity, right? And so it was at some point in that part of the growth cycle that I think Ford really started to look at it and say like, okay, and probably it may not have been Ford. Like truthfully, it could have been you that said,
it was Brian. Because I mean, in all honesty, I fought against it for a long time because I've seen too many big companies, and we actually benefit from this from time to time, where a company has a maintenance department and they have a budget and they will do work that they don't need to do because they don't want their budget cut the next year.
Sure. Yeah.
And so it always made me feel that people would only go to whatever was on the paper.
Right.
So that's why I always was so anti-budgeting, because it was like, we want the opportunities to come in the door, and we never want to have an estimator or someone say, oh, John Doe called with this 5-year, $18 million project. And I said no because our backlog was.
I already met my quota.
Yes.
I already met my goal.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Our goals were full. We didn't want to take it. And so it always made me so nervous because I've seen. Now, those are large institutions. It's a different ballgame. But I just was always nervous about putting something on there that then if we were going to go past it, people would kind of all of a sudden start pulling in the reins because they didn't want to push the envelope further and further and further.
Sure.
Yeah.
But the problem is with that, and in I guess my growth of understanding it is that it also doesn't give you anything to shoot for. It's just whatever blows in that day type of deal. And I think, for a while we just kind of were waifs in the wind until we had to realize that we need to do it. Now it's still a work in progress. I know some companies, it's like an oiled machine and they know where it is and they're, every month they're like, okay, did we hit our budgets? Are we again? What's our deficit to budget? Like they don't even talk about dollars anymore. All they talk about is our, percents over under budget. You have to actually look at the paperwork.
Yeah.
Like I'm on a board.
It's like golf, right? Like, you over or under par.
Right. So, it's like, what's the actual score? I don't know, but I was, they're just
plus and minus.
Yeah,
plus or minus.
The pluses or minuses, and I'm like, but why are we at the plus or minuses? Like I'm always deep and digging in, and people are after a while like, all right, just be quiet. Like that's not what we're asking here. And I'm like, I know, but like, why is this department under or overperforming, all we're saying is like they're plus 5% or minus 9%. They're not saying like, what is the cause of that? And how do you drive for excellence? If they're like, well, as long as we stay within our budget, we're good. We don't have to like still push to try and maximize every possible thing that they can.
Well, and it's funny because so when Ford says that exact sort of setup, right, you sort of feel that good to great, right, which is one of the early ones that we sort of looked at, that we could be performing, but are we excelling? Are we exceptional? Are we trying to be great? Are we trying to do these things? And I think in the portion where, as Ford just said, like we listened, or he listened and said, okay, we're going to try and budget a little bit. And I don't know if that's that first interaction when, with Nina when we're in your basement. I don't know if that's that window of where you start to do it, or maybe it was a year or two earlier than that with Brian, and then eventually I got involved in it. But we end up in a situation where then we start to say like, okay, we want to be X. And something I think completely different than Ford anticipated would happen, which was we set goals, but we almost ignored the like 1 year goal and maybe even the 3. And like we set these goals and we raced to the goals. So we continued with this growth on a high trajectory, fast accelerating, continued growth, but a little bit more guided. We weren't ready necessarily, but
yeah. Well, I think honestly, like this may be just perspective, right? And like we might be just seeing it from a little bit different angle potentially. But I think that like we didn't like necessarily race to get to our targets. We just kind of kept doing the same thing, and the projects that we were looking for came at us faster than our quote unquote budget.
Yeah, 100%. I didn't mean to say we were racing.
Yeah,
I meant to say like we got there much faster than we anticipated.
We got there much faster than we anticipated, and I don't think it was necessarily intentional. I don't think it was like, hey,
we said by 2020 or whatever we're going to be at
our
this.
hit rates didn't get better, right? We didn't start winning more work than we anticipated. We found more opportunities and got the same hit success, and we like kind of blew past those 1-3 year targets straight to a 5-year target or something like that. And that's what I kind of meant when I say it happened violently. It's we sort of sat down and we sort of said, if we're going to be reasonable about this and we're going to try and protect.
Were we going to try and be reasonable?
Well, it seemed like it. It seemed like that was the intent.
All right.
That
was the hope.
Hope's not the strategy.
No, it wasn't. Turned out to not be.
We wrote some things down on paper that sounded like we all agreed to.
I tried.
We got to the end. We got to the end point. We definitely got there.
We got to the finish line, Brian.
Yeah, for sure. But I think that like along the way, like we were strategic in trying to establish like how we were going to balance the growth and how we were going to fund the growth with working capital. And so when I say violent, it wasn't like fist fights.
No.
We weren't yelling and screaming at each other. It just happened so fast that that it felt like success, but it felt like the success was also maybe like at times drowning us.
Yeah.
So
you never know how someone's going to interpret what you say.
Yeah. So.
But I love the way you describe it as violent and chaotic because it's what it felt like.
Sure.
You know what I mean? But it was a lot of fun. Like in my mind, it almost like in a crazy analogy, like surfing in a hurricane.
Sure.
Like that is violent and it's chaotic. It is also really fun.
Yeah.
When it goes well, it is really not fun.
It's fun when it doesn't kill you. Yeah.
If it doesn't kill you. You know what I mean? And like truly, as having surfed in those storms, it doesn't have to kill you. It is only fun when it's not injuring you.
Yeah, that's fair.
You know what I mean? But there are points when you go over and you realize like, oh, this is actually really bad.
Yeah.
There's nothing I can do about it at that point. I just got to adjust and survive, which suited us.
Sure.
You know what I mean? We were able to adapt. We were able to keep our heads above water, so to speak, and do that. Yeah. But at some point in that, we came to an even cleaner realization that, okay, this has to be managed. Like we have to figure out how to do it. And it was difficult for us. It was difficult for me because it's not something I like to do. And one of the most painful parts is when I wanted to buy a track hoe, I think. And you told me that if I wanted to buy the track hoe, I had to do some ridiculous amount of work more. Right? Like, I don't remember what it was. Do you remember the number?
No.
It wasn't ridiculous from your number. It was ridiculous in my thinking.
Sure. Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't remember. I feel like I wanted to buy a track hoe that was like $500,000.
Could be.
And you told me I had to build $10 million more. And I was like, okay, that doesn't even make any sense. And then you had some math that worked out that's what the math said. Yeah. And I had never looked at it that way. I had looked at it like, no, you're not understanding. I need to move X amount of dirt. In order to do that, I need that track hoe.
Sure.
So we're going to need to buy that track hoe so I can move the dirt. Do you not understand that I make money? Right. And like, so it was the first time that the two worlds collided. And I sort of had to address that there's some other piece to this long term that I wasn't looking at. And that would be part of what factored into some of our trouble down the line. You know what I mean? As we ran into things, was some of that kind of decision making, and then some just carelessness by people. But as we are now, the way I see it, it's just so funny to work through it, because now we genuinely try to project, right? Like you've been doing it for 8 years, where you have your projections and they lay out and they're broken into every little box. But I've started to really engage with those numbers more. And they are different in how they're meaningful to me than you.
Yeah.
Like for you, you're looking at them as cost centers and what each cost center is. Does this make sense? Whereas for me, I immediately take it to, okay, we're going to be X amount of dollars top line. That means that we need to generate X amount per employee. We have how many employees? Does that math work? And then I break it into 12 months based on your historical data. And I take the 3 high months and I'm like, okay, could I generate enough revenue? And then we're backing into what Ford was talking about and you were talking about before we started, that if Scott wants to be X and his win percentage is 30%, or if Dylan wants to be Y and his is 15, they need to be respectively 3 and 6X that they need to bid. So when we look at that number and I say we want to be, whatever are we comfortable saying, we're not projecting yet, but historically what we've done.
I mean, like it's 3 and 6 only if you're going to take everything that you win.
Everything that you win.
Right. So if you want selection in what you choose,
it could be 5 and 10.
Yeah,
and that's one thing we were dealing with another estimator somewhere, and like we had to choose to not do a job.
Yeah.
And the estimator kind of got
upset.
Yeah, he didn't quite take it well. And the joke is, you're almost like a professional athlete, a professional baseball player. You have to strike out more than a professional baseball player does and still be willing to get up the next day and do it again. Because if you're at 10 to 15%, that's what, 100 batting average, 150, you're not even making, but I mean, like, that's literally the mentality that they have to be. Because listen, we all know that there's certain jobs we want more than others. There's certain clients we want more than others. And you have to be like, well, didn't get that one. Maybe you get some feedback and you can learn why you didn't get that particular. Maybe you get no feedback and you just literally have to be like, okay, that wasn't the one for us. We didn't look at it the way that somebody else did, whatever the scenario might be. But that is the mentality and the amount of time that, like, if someone from the field's like, oh, I couldn't get a hold of the estimator. It's like that job you're working on, the job you see, there's 10 more that they're working on right now that we'll never see.
9 of them you're never going to see. Right. You're never even going to know what happened. Right. But it was that was a whole, period in his time. And I mean, if you go back to not even numbers, but just we know historically we have been $20 million. If you took $20 million, I mean, you're talking, in the commercial landfill, that side, the outside of special projects, call it the civil division outside of special projects.
Sure.
They could have to bid to get to that number. They're going to have to bid almost $200 million worth of work.
Yeah, more easily.
You know what I mean? Like that's a like just break that. Like Ford always talked about, what book was it that he said, "How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?" Right? If you're talking, for argument's sake, let's make it $240 million, right? That he would have to bid at $240 million. There's only 12 months.
20 mil a month.
You know what I mean? Like you're bidding $20 million worth of work a month. Now think about our average job size. We don't do a lot of $8-10 million jobs. We've done it, but our average job size is $1 million, $1.5 million max. So, I mean, you're talking about every single month. You know what I mean? He's got to bid 20 jobs. There's only 4 weeks. He's got to bid a job a day. Like, you just start to do the math. It's crazy. And the same thing happens in special projects with Scott, because his number would be lower and he wins a little bit higher, but his jobs are smaller. And he's just turning over job after job after job. And then people say like, oh, I couldn't get a hold of Scott. And I was like, well, that's because Scott worked 11 hours today and put out 3 bids. You know what I mean? Like, there's a good reason for it, because you need jobs in 3-6 months.
Right.
So that became the interesting portion. It's pretty easy. We could sit in a room in a vacuum and create budgets, no problem. Like if you, Ford, and I wanted to just sit down and like somehow we had a job that our job was just, we need you to create budgets that would work. It'd be pretty easy. What percentage do you want to make? 10%. Okay, we're going to make 10%. Here's what Brian says the costs are. That means we need to bill this much. There's the top line revenue. We could figure out how many jobs. We could figure out how many people. But could you do the work? Could you win the work? Could you find the work that you want to do? Like, that's what really becomes interesting. Is
Does the schedule work?
Does the schedule work? You're not just trying to win enough work to keep everybody busy. You're trying to win work to keep everybody busy at the right time, with the right client, doing the right work in the right area. And then after you've done all that correctly, you have to hope that no one else is hungrier than you on that job and needs it. Because if they need it, they're just going to undercut you at 2, 3, 5, 0%.
Sure.
And there's nothing you can do about it after all that work. And that's the hard part as an estimator, is you go in there and you could have the winning number, and it doesn't necessarily mean you win. And there's been times, I still say my most successful bids, we lost because someone did something wrong. Like, you know what I mean? Like, their number was off and they found out.
Someone else.
Or my number was off and somebody bailed me out. Because it's not, none of us are perfect. They're estimates. They're educated guesses based on what we statistically believe would happen. So it takes a certain mentality to be an estimator. And it takes a lot to get the work to the team. There's a lot that goes into that for the estimators. And then they got to hand it off to the project manager. And, no step of this business is easy. Mm-hmm. But when you really start to, if you're listening, you start to do some math and just think about the jobs you sit on and think about the fact that, whether it be Scott or Dylan, they likely bid, 10 times what you know of. And look at their bid. You know what I mean? Like, all the foremen have heavy job. Open it up. See how much is in there that they have to do on each of those bids. You know what I mean? And you start to realize what it takes to do that. And that makes budgeting, forecasting hard for me, because I'm not just sitting there making up numbers. I'm not just sitting in a room saying like, oh, we're going to be X. Like, okay, well, does X make sense? Does it make sense by the month? Does it make sense by our workforce, our equipment, our manpower, our cash flow, our schedule?
Mm-hmm.
Well, not that, but like by the month, sounds good, but we're in the Northeast. Yeah. All months are not created equal as far as work capacity. So all of a sudden, then you're floating it into certain months and off on other months and things of that nature. So, it is a work in progress. But then the other part that's interesting as you start getting more of this data and looking at it is what data points do you want to use? A friend of ours up in Maine, they use this one data point that I don't even think we track exact, but they found it to be their most valuable data point. Other data points that, like, most people say, like, there's people you can follow, like, oh, you got to follow this one or whatever. But they found a data point that they use as their management way of doing things. And it's really interesting because to them, that's how all of their decisions are made. And
we've tried to look at that number. It's not something we historically track. But
But I mean, that might not work for us, but like, it's trying to find whatever data point you're looking for. That would be a way to be like, okay, this is the right mix.
Well, and it is a good indication. I mean, when you track it historically like that, like we have, I mean, you can see when the problem's coming, and like it's
when you look back at it, then you're like, yep, I could have seen it, right?
Yeah, it's like, all right, well, and usually it's too late, right? Because
it's all trailing data.
And the reality is, like, even if you project that data, based on everything you just said, you can't react fast enough to fill the backlog or to find the right mix of work at the right time. And that's usually when you have an issue, right? So, I mean,
you always stop bidding for a reason.
Well, you stop bidding, but the other thing is that, like, schedules, like, forget everything else, but like, we got 8 jobs coming up that are going to start next week. I've been doing this long enough. If you get 2 of the 8 to actually start on time at this point, you're doing really well. So, I mean, you have to have extras in your pocket because you're trying to get consistent work for the team. And so you're like, all right, we're going to push it. And there's probably one more job than what we have people for, but we're almost betting on that slide because we've known it's happened so that we can kind of keep everybody rolling. And it's just,
And we've had to go the other way where it does start and you're piecing it together for a little while until you can
figure
out the right group to, add a piece or 2 or whatever it might be. And
another crew added on.
Kind of always, you got to live on that edge, right? If you're too far on one side or the other, it's not going to work. For sure. Yeah. Yeah, the forecasting budgeting process is is tricky because like when you start to take into consideration historical trends, you're trying to compare times in our short-ish history over 20 years, right? 22 years or whatever it's been. That's not that long. Like the cycles that we've gone through in 22 years, like it's almost difficult to take snapshots of any 3 to 5 year period of time and have it be meaningful. What you have to rely on a little bit is that backlog number. Like, do we have enough under contract at current cost structure that we believe we can add at similar or greater cost structure to continue to produce in the manner that we want to? So when you look at the way our backlog is generally structured, usually our backlog is a great indicator of how our year is going to go. Because when you come to 9/30 and you say, I've got X number of dollars of backlog and I am X percentage complete on that backlog, and based on as bid, if it goes so well, then I know I'm already sitting at margin of Y. So the rest of the work that I had hoped to do for the year, it's got to be better than that. Or it's got to be as good as that if I want to hold those margins. Because if it's not, like, you already kind of know, or should have an indication now, based on your backlog starting 10/1, what the leading indicator is for how your year starts. So yeah, it's tough because, like you said, you can't turn that faucet off. You turn the faucet off, it's going to get dry quickly. So yeah, projecting is difficult.
It is. It is, and it's
and then you go
it's
through,
not a science. That's the funny part.
You go through a period like the last 5 years, and the significant changes that our industry has seen from a labor perspective, from a cost perspective, scheduling issues, permitting issues. Have gone from COVID, some semblances of recession. Everyone's talking about like what happens with tariffs. It's try and create consistency or enough to not only project but feel comfortable putting that much work on the books.
Well, and one of the really funny things I think is you look at Ford and I were looking at it earlier today, but like your projection from 23, 24, 25,
sure.
I'm trying to work through that and figure out what I can comfortably tell you, I think, is a top line that we start with and
sure.
all those sort of things. And there's so much math there, right? There's so much data, so much very hard, concrete numbers. But it's still an art. It's not a science. Like, it is a science to put the numbers together the way you do. But in order to try and project what is coming is not really science because there's too many variables we don't know. Now we're just saying, like, okay, based on what we know.
Well, you're not starting at zero. That's the good thing.
No, right? We're not. But I'm just saying, in other words, you look at all that data and you would, like, by the time you complete the projection for 26, right, which is very soon, and you give it to us, it is going to look like science. Like, it's going to be very specific numbers, like $452,352.27. Like, that's the number. That's not the number. Yeah. That's our best guess based on you taking a great deal of historical data, putting that into a system that the three of us sat down and said, based on current conditions, we believe we could do this with this many people to try and arrive at a number. So it's this really odd thing where it's very scientific in how we can get there and how we explain it.
Sure.
But there's still so much unknown in what we're actually trying to project because
then you actually have to go do the work,
and then you have to go do the work, and then it rains 20 days in June. You know what I mean? It's just that's what's so crazy about it is it's very hard, and a lot of times you and I have a conversation either when it goes well or when it doesn't, and we'll want to talk about like what went wrong or what went well, and so many times I can explain to you what went well or what didn't go well, but it doesn't help. Like I wasn't able to explain it to you before because I didn't know it was going to rain 15 to 20 days. I had no idea that statistically should not have happened. So, but it did, and so you're sitting there trying to explain why something happened that you couldn't have possibly projected now. And sometimes you just make a mistake. You know what I mean? It's just a bad bid. There's a blown cost. There's something you didn't see, and then you can explain it. But so much of the time, what we see when we don't hit goals or when we exceed them is because of some change that was sort of unanticipated, that just broke right or broke wrong. And we've seen that with some of our most profitable jobs, where there was overruns on a material, overruns on that an engineer did not correctly anticipate what the work was.
Right.
And we run over, and so then we're in good shape just by luck of the number. But there's so much involved with it, and it's something that never gets to the field. Once it's to the field, it's just time to do the work.
That's for sure.
And the most they would know from a target standpoint is we're going to do X amount of feet of pipe a day. We're going to do, and then you hear estimators or project managers harp on it, right? Like, you got to do this footage of pipe every day. You have to.
Right.
But the reason is because everything else behind it said you had to. And if you don't, every number doesn't work.
Right.
And it falls apart real fast.
I've heard Setson talk about it a little bit, and we've talked about this a little bit before. So it's difficult at times to make the translation, right? I mean, our folks in the field do their job really well, and for them to try and dig into a budget or a projection, I'm not trying to sell them short, but it starts to water down the things that they are really good at. And so, we talked before about like some of that handoff, like how do you hand something off to the folks who are going to execute it and do so in a way that's easy for them to understand the importance and the value from a production and a budget perspective, but then also let them translate that into boots on the ground, actual performance. How do I get my guys to get this to completion and meet or exceed those expectations? And a lot of times, and I've seen, this is just recently ran into this, but with Stetson talking about it, not from dollars and cents, but from man hours. Like we've budgeted X number of man hours to accomplish this task, not to, not some interpretation of the task. Like if you want to say I put 100 feet of pipe in the ground, the budget wasn't to lay the pipe into the dirt. The budget was dig the trench, put the pipe in the put the pipe down in the trench, make your connections, backfill. Everything's on grade. That's it. Now your 100 feet is in the ground, right? And how many man hours did it take you to do that? That's the budget. And so
yes,
which is a lot easier, I think, in some ways, for people to sort of visualize, like how many days, how many hours, how many people did I have to attribute to these tasks. Am I on target or not? And so I think that's important for us to, like, as leadership, be transparent, continue to communicate it, but also really work with our leaders in the organization to figure out ways to translate it into mechanisms that make sense for the people that we're asking to actually be accountable to whether or not it happens. So yeah, something that he's doing really well.
It can be competitive, or like it's how many trucks you have to load a day, right?
Yeah,
so it's like, I'm not going to count, you don't want to get too micro into it, but it's okay. Instead of counting how many yards, I know I need to load 65 trucks today.
Sure.
So if I load those 65 trucks and I can get 5 extra, we're 5 to the good.
Right.
Not trying to do like, okay, I have to hit this many, because that's where the thing is, there's a count of whatever it is.
Right.
And, behind the scenes, it translates to dollars.
You make it too granular, you start to lose the effect.
Right.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
I'm going to count every ton of stone. It's like,
we're not counting buckets here.
Yeah.
Let's count turns, you know? So, yeah.
Make it something that's fun to count, or a little clicker. Right. I mean, when we used to do like heavy haul jobs, we had the little clicker in the track cone. You like click, there's another truck there. Click, okay, how many we get done today? Okay, we loaded 200 trucks or whatever it is.
And the guys would keep, the team would keep track, and that's when we're running at our best. We are overproducing. We are beating expectations. But I would argue not because we're trying to beat expectations. We're beating expectations because we're almost having fun. Like things are going the way they're supposed to go. And the team is pushing as hard as they can to see what they can do, to see how good they can be, how effective. And at the end, not that they don't know the number they're trying to beat, but in other words, there is a difference, I believe there's a difference in me saying, Brian, you have to work 8 hours today.
Yeah.
Or me saying like, Brian, we're going to really push and see if we can get all of this done today. And then maybe it took us 7 hours or maybe it took us 9. But if we did the work or did more,
right.
You know what I mean?
Did you finish
then
it?
Then we can feel good about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so sometimes we would run and the guys would run 8 hours and they would beat the numbers. Other times they'd be running 10, 11 hours and they get to the number or whatever, but the conditions, but they felt like it was a victory, and that's important because this is hard work. So to go out, it's hard to tell people to go out there and fail, you know what I mean? And feel like they didn't succeed.
Yeah.
They didn't achieve what they needed to. And so that's really the other piece of like Stetson and the team's job is to make sure they can frame this all in a way that A, it's achievable, but B, that they're identified. They're appreciated from a sense of supporting them and saying like, that was a great job today. You got 65, we were looking for 65, you got 68. You got 66. It's one more. It doesn't matter. You hit the number and you got more. That's good. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, not only that, but because of weather and stuff like that, like you're trying to build a buffer in for yourself.
Sure.
You got 10 days and every day you're supposed to do 65 trucks in a row. That's 2 weeks. Well, you better get, on the days you can, you better get like 70 because what if you have a rain day and you don't get a single day out? So there's just so many of those factors in play to try and maximize. I just think back to years ago when we were running long roads with trucks, off-road trucks, and we got a new truck driver in, and immediately our load count went up by like 20%. Just one new driver. They just were pushing a little harder than everybody else, but everybody rose,
Everybody realized
high tide rises all ship, but everybody just
Mm-hmm.
picked it up a little bit, and all of a sudden their performance as a team was actually better just because they were pushing just a little extra.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if our people want to hear us talk more about budgeting.
Well, that's once for this year, so we can check that off the box.
Once a year. That's a good place to wrap it up. Thanks for joining us today, folks. We hope that you got something from this, and we hope you come back for another episode.